All right. Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so now this will be your lesson 5 for gender and society. Again, this is still part of introduction on the terminologies that we might encounter or we will encounter during our uh, you know um, more volume and deep conversation and lesson on our gender and society class. All right. Now, we are now going to focus more on the SOGI. Okay, as you know, maybe some of you might not know the term SOGI. Some of you might know the term SOGI because of the last years or maybe 2 years ago's news about the SOGI bill. Okay, but this one is really more on the gender studies. All right, so SOGI stands for SO stands for sexual orientation, GI stands for gender identity, and E stands for expression. So that is your spectrum of fluidity. Okay, not because what you see, okay, not what you see is what you really knew about or know about the person's gender or sexual orientation. That's why SOGI was really made. It's because it makes it more specific. Okay, it also advocates to lessen and eradicate stereotypes as well. Okay, but then again, stereotypes is something that we cannot really just avoid in just one snap, right? But then again, it is way, way, way much better for everyone, not just for the other viewers, but also to all my students in gender and society to know their SOGI. Okay, now as you can see here, this is the LGBT plus community. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot of them. Okay, we will have more specific discussion on this one later on. Okay, but I just want you to see it. Okay, that's how it really goes now. So LGBTQQIA. All right, now SOGIE Spectrum is another tool to identify the different aspects of human gender and sexuality. Okay, people's identities can be fluid, as what I've said earlier. Okay, the spectrum shows how people's identities can be fluid and is also not a universal tool for determining gender, as one's gender can only be determined by oneself. That's why, okay, SOGI is not culture or tradition based. It might be socially constructed, okay, because at some point, whatever is whatever you are surrounded with, could be a could be a supplement for who and what you are as of the moment. But again, SOGI is not really based on culture or tradition because it is identifying yourself, okay, your gender. Okay, that's why it's very fluid, and that is why SOGI was really there. It's because to identify the fluidity of one's gender and sexuality at the same time. Okay, as you can see, the SOGI spectrum, of course. Let's start with your intersex. Okay, what is your assigned sex at birth? Do you have the male genitalia when you were born, or the female genitalia when you were born? So that's highly biological. For your sexual orientation, that's how you identify yourself. Are you part of the heterosexual community or the homosexual community, or are you both, like bisexual? Pansexual means that you are, attracted to any gender and sexuality. That includes transgender. All right, don't be confused with bisexual and pansexual. Bisexual is for same sex and for opposite sex. All right, but for pansexual, it's the spectrum there is you are attracted or you can be with all types of gender, including transgender, transsexual, and so on and so forth. And asexual, who is not really interested at all to anything. All right. So what is your gender identity? Are you um, man or a woman? Okay. So are you a gender queer? Okay. Are you part of the umbrella of of the LGBT community, or are you a transgender? And of course, how do you express yourself? Are you really more like masculine or feminine or gender neutral? Okay, so that's why SOGI is there for you to really identify your spectrum of who and what you are. Okay, so let's have a more introduction on the LGBTQIAAP community. All right. So for lesbians, of course, a woman who is primarily attracted to women. Okay, so they are lesbians. Lesbians are not necessarily need to be masculine. Okay, I have a lot of friends who looks so like feminine, who are like the typical women who wears makeup and so on and so forth. Okay, and they're lesbians and they're attracted to the same sex. They're also attracted to women who also wear high heels, dresses and makeups as well. So lesbians are not necessarily need to be transgender or masculine at the same time. Okay, all right. For gay, of course, a man who is primarily attracted to men, sometimes a broad term for individuals primarily attracted to the same sex. When you say sometimes broad term, that's why if you have watched some Hollywood movies and you were wondering why do they call some lesbians so gay? Why do they use the term gay? Even though they're lesbians, because at some point it is really a broad term for individuals who primarily attracted to the same sex. Okay, so there are also women who there's also some of my friends who addressed my lesbian friend to be gay, like you're gay, and even though they're lesbians, because that's also one way of um term or a term for individuals who are attracted to the same sex. But just like lesbians, there are gays who are not necessarily need to be transgender. There are gays who are very masculine, who goes to gym, who do manly stuff. Okay, so it's not necessarily for gay and lesbians to be transgender. Okay, they can be masculine and feminine at the same time, or they can be masculine only or feminine only. But the core um, identifier of being a gay is just really being attracted to the same sex, and that's it. Okay, that's the core identifier. I'm not saying it's the only identifier, but that's the core. All right, okay. For bisexual, of course, an individual attracted on their own people and opposites. So they could be attracted to gay and or lesbian, okay, or they can be attracted to the opposite sex. That's it. Yeah. Okay. Now for transgender, okay, a person whose gender identity is different from their assigned sex at birth. Now, there are some conspiracy about transgender, and there are some confusion. The transgender is also a uh, cross-dresser. Okay. However, we don't really use the term cross-dresser because there are culture on some other parts of the world where cross-gender or cross-dressing is not really part of the LGBT plus community at all. Is not really necessarily need to be transgender. There are some culture who men are required to wear skirt or skill, okay, because that's part of their culture, but does not necessarily mean they are part of the spectrum of the SOGIE or whatsoever. All right, okay. So I highly advise or suggest that we don't really use the word cross dressers, okay, but transgender only. Okay, so transgender are the individuals who wear the opposite sex's wardrobe. Okay, for example, for a man who wears skirt and dresses and who wears makeup, they can also be considered as transgender. And for women who wears or expresses a very masculine feature, then that could also be a transgender at the same time. All right. Okay. Now for the transsexual, okay, so they are also like transgender. However, they have undergone some surgical um, changes. Okay, for example, for men, they will need to have more, they will have an implant of breast, okay, and they will be, their genitals will be removed, okay, and for women who can also remove their breasts, okay, so those are also transsexual. As you can see, trans from the word sexual and gender, okay, so sexual is really more on the genetic side. I wouldn't say they are genetically modified, that's not true. Okay, but they are physiologically modified, that's the right term there. Okay, it could also be hormones, like maybe they are taking hormonal injections. It's either testosterone for lesbians who want to have more manly features physically, and for men who wants to have estrogen injections for men who wants to have more female features, like maybe decreasing of body hair, okay, you know, development of the breast, okay, what else? Decrease in the size of their genitalias, okay. So those are some things that a transsexual really do, and those are core identifiers, by the way. Okay, so don't be confused with transgender and transsexual. Right? Okay, for queer, okay, so this is like the SOGIE version of the LGBT, because SOGIE is also applicable for heterosexuals. All right, okay, it's not just the SOGIE doesn't really just focuses on the LGBT community, but it also includes the heterosexual. Okay, so it's not the SOGIE is really for everyone. Okay, but for the queer, it is the SOGI version or the umbrella version for inclusive for the LGBT community only. Okay, so questioning. Okay, I really don't like that term closeted. Okay, so there is no such thing as closeted, but there is such thing as questioning. So these are the people who are still confused. Okay, they still need more affirmation of themselves, whether they are part of this community or what are their gender is, and so on and so forth. Because when you say closeted, okay, the basic concept of closeted is fear. Okay, well, in fact, at some point, those fear are induced by it's either cultural or traditional boundaries, or at the same time, they're still confused. Okay, so it's not really the fear that stops them from affirming, but it's all about the question, the curiosity, or the boundaries and thresholds of culture and traditions. So this process of exploring and discovering one's own sexual orientation, gender identity, and or gender expression. Okay, so yeah, right. For intersex, an individual whose sexual anatomy or chromosomes do not fit with the traditional marks of male and female. Okay, so basically, these are um, these are some individual who has this feature without any modification, but they were traditionally born male and female. Okay, they are not necessarily need to be diagnosed with Klinefelter syndrome or other sexual related syndrome or disorders. It's not. Okay, sometimes it's just really a matter of how of their lifestyle, okay, or their physiological intake of whatever their intaking is, right? So that's intersex. Okay, for ally, okay, these are a non-queer person or people who supports the advocates for the queer community. So not because you support the community, it doesn't mean that you have to be, uh, you know, gay or homosexual. Ally means, from the word ally, they are aid. Okay, they are the people who are very much willing to help to advocate gender equality, not just women equality, but in general gender equality. So those are allies, and I hope some of you are allies here. You may not be part of the community, but I hope that all of you are ally. When you say ally, it's not necessarily mean you need to really impose what you believe. It's really a matter of respect, non-discriminative behavior, non-prejudice approach to people. Okay, and it does not just address for the LGBT, but also for heterosexuals. Okay, there are also discrimination against heterosexuals, especially for women, and women are heterosexual. Okay, so there are some discrimination against women and against men and against LGBT. So ally is something that you don't really need to impose or to fight with them. Okay, but it's just really a matter of respect, acceptance, tolerance, and so on and so forth. And I think that's really the basic concept of ally. That is. All right. For asexual, an individual who generally does not feel sexual desire or attraction to any group of people. So they are the people who doesn't really attracted to any single one. Okay. Don't get me wrong, they're not really selfish. They're not selfish. Okay. It's just that how they really bring up themselves. They just don't really attracted. They're not really attracted or they don't have any desire to any people. That's it. I'm talking about romantically. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, for pansexual, this is the opposite of asexual. This is a person who experiences sexual, romantic, physical, or spiritual attraction to members of all gender identities and expression. So, pansexual is very different from bisexual because bisexual is just a matter of opposite and same sex. But for pansexual, it's all types of gender and sexes. Okay, so for example, you are male when you were born and you're pansexual. It doesn't really necessarily mean that you need to be a transgender or a gay or a bi, but you can really be pansexual. Okay, so it's not really a matter of being bisexual first, being a homosexual first. No, it's not like that. You can be pansexual on the first process after gender constancy. All right, okay. And yep, now I think that's it. Okay, that's all part of the LGBT plus community. I do hope that you can really apply, being respectful to each other, not just for women, not just for men, but also for the LGBT as well. All right, so I think that's it. Okay, you hit the subscribe button to have more updates, and of course, you can also comment there if ever you have any reaction or feedback about this discussion. And I'll see you guys next time.